From the outside, our marriage looked flawless. Neighbors envied us, friends admired us, and family members often said we were the perfect couple. We hosted dinners, smiled in photographs, and carried ourselves like the picture of harmony. If someone had asked me then, I might have agreed with them. After all, appearances have a way of convincing even those who wear them. Nausea, my wife, was charming in every sense. She had a laugh that could fill a room, and an elegance that made strangers stop and stare. People saw her as the devoted wife, standing by my side at every event, whispering into my ear as though she couldn't live without me. I saw her as my partner, my anchor in a world that often felt overwhelming. But illusions are dangerous things. They shimmer so brightly that you forget to question what lies beneath. In our case, that shine hid cracks I chose not to see. I worked long hours, determined to provide us with a comfortable life. She often said she appreciated it, though sometimes I noticed her eyes drift when I spoke about work, as if her mind was somewhere else. I told myself it was nothing, just fatigue or maybe boredom. Every marriage had its quiet moments, I reasoned. We had rituals that kept the facade strong. Friday night dinners at our favorite restaurant. Sunday walks in the park. Weekend visits with her friends, which she always described as girls' therapy. I never questioned it. Why would I? Trust was the foundation of our marriage, or so I believed. Looking back, the signs were always there. The way she guarded her phone a little too closely. The way her smiles seemed forced when she thought I wasn't watching. The occasional flashes of irritation when I asked too many questions. At the time I brushed it aside. I didn't want to believe that something was wrong. In truth, I was living in a dream carefully crafted by both of us. Me blinded by love and routine, and her hiding behind a mask I didn't know existed. The illusion was perfect. But illusions never last forever. At first, the changes were subtle, so small they could be explained away with a careless shrug. Nausea began staying out later than usual. She would claim her friends wanted just one more drink, or that traffic had been terrible. I believed her because I wanted to. Trust, after all, is built not on evidence but on faith. But faith can be fragile. One night she came home long after midnight. Her perfume was stronger than usual, as though she had reapplied it recently. When I asked how the evening had gone, she answered too quickly, her smile wide but her eyes evasive. My gut twisted with unease, yet my mouth formed the words. "I'm glad you had fun." It didn't end there. Her phone, once left casually on the kitchen counter, became an extension of her hand. She carried it everywhere, even to the bathroom. When I teasingly asked if she was afraid I might see something, she laughed, but the sound was hollow. "Don't be silly," she said, but the way she turned the screen away from me told another story. I began to notice her distance. During dinners, her fork would linger above her plate while her mind wandered elsewhere. When I asked what she was thinking, she'd brush it off with a vague, nothing important. Her laughter, once effortless, now felt rehearsed. The whispers of doubt grew louder when a mutual friend mentioned seeing Nausea at a cafe on the other side of town, a place she never mentioned visiting. She had been with a man, though the friend insisted they couldn't be sure if it was anything more than casual. I forced a smile, thanked them for the observation, and told myself it meant nothing. But the seed had been planted. The breaking point came one Saturday morning. Nausea said she was meeting her girlfriends for brunch. Hours later, while running errands, I happened to pass a quiet street near the city center. There she was, standing too close to a man I didn't recognize, her hand brushing against his arm in a way no friendly conversation could justify. I froze, my heart pounding, but I didn't approach them. Instead, I drove away, my knuckles white against the steering wheel. That image haunted me for days. I wanted to confront her to demand answers, but a voice in my head urged patience. If I exploded without proof, she could twist the story, make me seem paranoid. I needed to be smarter. For the first time in our marriage, I began watching her carefully. Not with the eyes of a husband blinded by love, but with the cold observation of someone searching for the truth. Every late-night text, every unexplained absence, every nervous laugh, it all added up. The suspicious signals were no longer whispers. They were alarms. And though my heart begged me to deny them, my mind knew the truth. Something was terribly wrong. Denial can only carry a man so far. For weeks, I told myself I was imagining things, that Nausea was loyal, that my fears were nothing more than insecurity. But deep down I knew the cracks were widening. And when the truth finally surfaced, it hit me like a sledgehammer. It happened on a Tuesday night. Nausea said she was meeting a friend for dinner. Her smile was casual, her tone light, but I couldn't ignore the tightness in her voice, the way she avoided my eyes as she left the house. Something in me snapped. I decided I needed more than suspicion. I needed proof. I waited 15 minutes after she drove off, then followed. My hands trembled on the steering wheel, my heart thundering as if I already knew what I was about to see. She didn't go to the restaurant she'd mentioned. Instead, she drove across town to a quiet hotel with glowing windows and a neon sign buzzing faintly in the night. I parked far enough to remain unseen, every breath cutting like glass. From the shadows, I watched her step out of the car. A man emerged from the hotel entrance, tall and broad-shouldered. His smile unmistakably intimate. They embraced, not the polite hug of acquaintances, but the lingering hold of lovers. I felt the ground tilt beneath me. My stomach churned as bile clawed its way up my throat. Still I couldn't look away. They walked inside together, laughing softly, her hand resting on his arm with a familiarity that shattered me. I sat there for nearly an hour, frozen, watching the clock on my dashboard. Each passing minute was another knife in my chest. Eventually I drove home, numb, empty, hollowed out by betrayal. When she returned later that night, her hair slightly tousled, her blouse wrinkled, she smelled faintly of cologne that wasn't mine. She kissed my cheek, pretending everything was normal, and I played along. But inside I was breaking. The next morning I began digging. I went through bank statements, phone records, and receipts. What I found confirmed everything. Charges from hotels, mysterious restaurant bills, Uber rides from unfamiliar addresses. Each line item screamed infidelity. Each detail was another nail in the coffin of the life I thought we shared. I sat in my office, staring at the evidence spread across my desk. Anger flared, hot and consuming, but beneath it was something colder, resolve. If Nausea thought she could betray me and walk away unscathed, she was wrong. I wouldn't confront her yet. No, she thrived on manipulation, and if I accused her without strategy, she would twist the truth and paint me as the paranoid husband. Instead, I chose silence. I watched her more carefully than ever, my eyes open, my heart barricaded. Every lie she told, every excuse she made, I stored away like ammunition. She believed she was clever, that her mask was unbreakable. But now I had seen behind it. That night, as she lay beside me pretending to sleep, I stared at the ceiling and whispered a vow only I could hear. You think you've broken me, Nausea. But this is just the beginning. The discovery had shattered me, yes, but it also awakened something she had never seen in me before. Patience, calculation, a determination as sharp as steel. And soon, the betrayer would learn what it meant to be betrayed. Once the veil of love had been torn away, I started to see everything differently. Nausea wasn't just cheating on me, she was changing. The woman who used to lean on me for comfort now carried herself with a strange arrogance, as if she had already outgrown me. She began dropping hints, subtle at first. Casual comments about how some marriages just aren't built to last, or how independence is the key to happiness. Each time she said it, she glanced at me, studying my face as though waiting for me to react. I gave her nothing. Then came the sharper edges. You're always so busy with work, she said one evening, her tone dripping with contempt. I need someone who actually makes me feel alive. I forced a smile, replying softly, I'll try to do better. But inside my blood boiled. Soon I realized that Nausea's betrayal wasn't limited to infidelity. It was calculated. She wasn't planning to leave quietly. She was plotting to destroy me. I overheard a late-night phone call when she thought I was asleep. Her voice was low, hushed, but clear enough. Don't worry. Once I'm done with him, I'll have the house and the accounts. He won't see it coming. My chest tightened as I lay there in silence. It wasn't just about love anymore, it was about power, money, control. She wanted everything. The next day, I noticed changes in her behavior that confirmed my suspicion. She suddenly showed an interest in our finances, asking about my accounts, investments, and property documents. Just curious, she said when I asked why. But curiosity doesn't come with that kind of urgency. She also became strangely bold with her spending. Luxury handbags, expensive dinners with friends, unexplained withdrawals. It was as though she was already living, as though my resources were hers to waste. I understood then. She wasn't planning a divorce out of heartbreak. She was building a trap designed to leave me ruined. She would betray me, take everything I had worked for, and walk away laughing. But she had underestimated me. What Nausea didn't know was that years ago, long before we married, I had prepared for the possibility of betrayal. A prep sat quietly in a file, one she barely remembered signing in the glow of champagne and wedding bells. I had always believed it would never be needed, but now it felt like a lifeline. As I watched her weaving her net of lies, I stayed silent. I let her believe she was clever, that she was in control. All the while, I was collecting my own evidence, building my own case, and preparing to turn her trap against her. Nausea thought she was playing me. But she didn't know the game had already begun. The hardest part wasn't the betrayal itself. It was pretending I didn't know. Every day felt like a performance, and I was forced into the role of the oblivious husband. Nausea thought she was fooling me, but in truth I was the one playing the fool, and I played it well. I greeted her with smiles when she returned late at night, never asking too many questions. I let her think I believed the half-baked excuses about girls' nights and work events. Inside my stomach turned, but on the surface I was calm, steady, dependable, the very image of the man she thought she could outwit. When she pushed boundaries, I let her. When she tested me with cruel remarks about my work or my so-called boring lifestyle, I swallowed my pride and laughed them off. The more she believed I was weak, the more reckless she became. And the more reckless she became, the more evidence I gathered. I started making copies of financial statements, recording her late-night phone calls, and quietly saving screenshots of her messages when she left her laptop open. I didn't need to confront her. Not yet. I needed her to keep digging her own grave. There were moments when my facade almost cracked. One evening, she came home with lipstick smudged at the corner of her mouth. She didn't even bother to check the mirror. She just walked into the kitchen, humming a tune while I sat there frozen. Rage burned in my chest, and my fists clenched beneath the table. But I forced myself to breathe, to smile, to say nothing. If I revealed my hand too soon, I'd lose everything. Nausea mistook my silence for weakness. She began flaunting her defiance. "You don't deserve me," she sneered one night after a glass too many of wine. "Do you even realize how many men would kill to have me?" I looked at her with a soft smile and replied, "You're right. I'm lucky to have you." Her laughter was cruel, mocking, but it didn't matter. Every insult, every betrayal, every lie was fuel. What she didn't realize was that my silence was my weapon. The more she underestimated me, the sharper my advantage grew. She thought she was draining me of strength, but all the while I was gathering power. It was a dangerous game, balancing the fury inside me with the calm mask I wore. But I reminded myself of the end goal. She thought she was plotting my ruin. She thought I was too blind, too naive, too soft to fight back. Let her think it. Let her laugh at me. Let her believe I was nothing more than a fool. Because when the time came, the fool would have the last laugh. By the time Nausea's arrogance reached its peak, I had already laid the groundwork for my counterstrike. She believed she was untouchable, that her beauty and cunning could manipulate me into giving her everything she wanted. But she had forgotten the one piece of paper that mattered most, the prenuptial agreement. It had been signed years ago, back when love was new, and she never imagined betrayal. At the time, she dismissed it as a meaningless formality, a little insurance to soothe my family's concerns. She barely skimmed the paragraphs before scribbling her name on the dotted line, eager to get to the champagne toasts and honeymoon plans. She didn't know that hidden in that document was my shield and my sword. I began meeting with my lawyer in secret, carefully sharing the evidence I'd gathered. The hotel receipts, the late-night calls, the messages that left no room for doubt. My lawyer, a sharp and seasoned man, leaned back in his chair and smiled after reviewing the prenup. "She has no idea what she signed, does she?" he asked. I shook my head. "Good," he said. "Because this isn't going to end the way she thinks." Meanwhile, at home, Nausea was playing her part to perfection, or so she thought. She began mentioning divorce more openly, almost carelessly, as if testing my reaction. "Maybe we'd both be happier apart," she said one evening over dinner, stabbing at her salad with a fork. I swallowed my smirk and replied, "If that's what you want." Her eyes lit up at my seemingly passive response. She believed I had accepted defeat, that I would hand her everything without a fight. That was exactly what I wanted her to think. Behind the scenes, she was moving money, consulting with her own attorney, and bragging to her lover on the phone about how she was going to walk away rich. She thought she was orchestrating the perfect betrayal. But every move she made was another step into the trap I had already set. Finally, the day came when she announced her decision. She stood in the living room, her tone rehearsed, her posture dripping with superiority. "I think it's best if we end this," she said. "I want the house, of course, and half of everything else. It's only fair." I looked at her with calm eyes and nodded. "If that's what you want, Nausea." Inside I was smiling. Because soon she would learn the truth. When the divorce proceedings began, she entered the courtroom like a queen ready to collect her crown. She wore her most expensive dress, her chin high, her smirk wide. She had convinced herself this was already won. But the moment came, the moment I had been waiting for. Her lawyer presented her demands confidently, listing assets she believed she was entitled to. Then my lawyer slid the prenup across the table. Nausea barely glanced at it at first, until her own attorney's expression began to crumble. His eyes widened, his lips tightened, and color drained from his face as he read the clause buried deep in the agreement. This changes everything," he muttered. Nausea's smirk faltered. She leaned toward him, whispering urgently, "What do you mean?" He looked at her, his voice low but sharp. "The house, the accounts, the assets. You signed them all away. If you divorce him, you get nothing." Her face went pale, her confidence dissolving into panic. For the first time, she realized she wasn't the predator in this game. She was the prey. And I didn't even have to raise my voice. All I did was sit back, silent, watching the trap snap shut. After that day in court, the air between Nausea and me grew heavy, thick with unspoken rage. The smug confidence she once wore like perfume had vanished, replaced by sharp glares and thinly veiled contempt. She had walked into the legal battlefield expecting a swift victory, only to find herself cornered and powerless. And she hated me for it. At home, the silence became deafening. She no longer bothered with small talk, no longer pretended to care about appearances. Every word that passed between us carried venom. Plates clinked loudly at dinner. Footsteps echoed like thunder down the hallway, and the house that once held warmth became a cage filled with tension. But underneath her anger, I saw something else brewing: desperation. Nausea wasn't the type to accept defeat gracefully. She had built her identity on control, on bending others to her will. To be stripped of power, to face the reality of walking away empty-handed, it was more than she could stomach. One evening, I overheard her on the phone again, her voice low but sharp. "He thinks he's won. He thinks that stupid prep has me trapped. But I'll find another way. He won't see it coming." Her words sent a chill down my spine, not because I feared her threats, but because I knew she meant them. Nausea was gathering her own storm, plotting something new, something beyond lawyers and contracts. Kept my guard up. I double-checked the locks on the doors, monitored the bank accounts more closely, and even installed a small camera in my office at home. If she tried to sabotage me further, I would have proof. At the same time, I felt the storm building within myself. For weeks, I had bottled up anger, pain, and betrayal, channeling them into cold calculation. But now, every insult she hurled, every glare she shot my way, every whispered phone call, it stoked the fire inside me. One night, as she stood by the window scrolling through her phone, she sneered without looking at me. "Do you really think this ends with you winning? You'll regret humiliating me." I met her gaze in the reflection of the glass and said nothing. Silence, I had learned, was the sharpest blade. And my silence only drove her further into madness. Behind the scenes, my lawyer and I prepared for the next phase. We weren't just defending against her claims anymore. We were building a case against her. Adultery, financial misconduct, evidence of her lover. All the pieces I had collected in secret were slowly forming a storm of their own, one that would crash down on her with devastating force. Nausea thought the prep was the end of the game. She didn't realize it was just the beginning. As the days passed, I could feel it, the tension growing, the storm clouds darkening. She moved through the house like a restless predator, pacing, muttering under her breath, snapping at every word I spoke. She was unraveling. And when a person like Nausea unravels, they become dangerous. But I wasn't afraid. Well, I was ready. The storm was coming, yes. But this time, I wasn't the one who would be left broken in its wake. The day of the final hearing arrived, and with it, the storm that had been building for months. The courtroom buzzed with quiet murmurs, every seat filled with curious eyes waiting to see how the scandal would unfold. For Nausea, this was her last chance at redemption or revenge. For me, it was the moment I had been waiting for. She walked in wearing her most expensive dress, her hair perfectly styled, her chin lifted with forced confidence. But I saw through it. The smirk that once came so easily now twitched under the weight of fear. Her lawyer whispered frantically to her as I sat calmly across the table, my own attorney composed and confident. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. The proceedings began, and Nausea's lawyer launched into a dramatic speech, painting her as a devoted wife abandoned by a cold, unfeeling husband. He spoke of emotional neglect, of a woman driven to desperation. Nausea nodded along, occasionally dabbing at her eyes with a tissue she didn't need. I remained still, expressionless, letting them dig their hole deeper. When her attorney demanded half of the marital assets, ignoring the prep entirely, I watched the judge's brows knit in disapproval. Then came the moment my lawyer had prepared me for. Calmly, he slid a thick folder of documents across the table. "Your Honor," he said, his voice steady, "my client has respected the law, the marriage, and the contracts signed by both parties. What Mrs. Carter fails to mention is not neglect, but deceit. We present evidence of multiple extramarital affairs, misappropriation of funds, and willful violation of marital trust." Gasps rippled through the courtroom as photographs, call logs, and bank statements were laid out in plain view. Nausea's face drained of color. Her lawyer snatched up the papers, flipping through them desperately, but the truth was undeniable. Nausea's composure cracked. "This is irrelevant," she shouted, her voice trembling. "He's twisting everything." The judge's gavel struck. "Silence, Mrs. Carter. You will conduct yourself appropriately." Her lawyer leaned in, his voice low but audible enough. "You didn't tell me about this. The hotel bills. The wire transfers. The prep clause. Nausea, what did you do?" Her eyes filled with panic. For the first time, the predator looked cornered, her mask slipping in front of everyone. My lawyer's closing words sealed it. This marriage was not destroyed by my client. It was destroyed by Mrs. Carter's deceit and greed. And as the agreement clearly states, she is entitled to nothing. The judge nodded, his verdict swift and firm. The prenuptial agreement will be honored. Mr. Carter retains sole ownership of all properties and assets. Mrs. Carter is entitled to no further compensation. The gavel fell one last time, the sound echoing like thunder. Nausea slumped back in her chair, her face pale, her dreams of riches crumbling before her eyes. Meanwhile, I rose calmly, adjusting my suit, my silence louder than any victory speech. The clash was over, and I had won. When the judge's gavel struck, Nausea's world collapsed in a single echo. The courtroom emptied, whispers trailing in the air like smoke after a fire. She remained seated, staring blankly at the table, her lawyer beside her with a face drained of all color. For months she had plotted, schemed, and boasted about how she would destroy me. Now, the very trap she set had closed around her, and there was no escape. The prep she dismissed so casually years ago had become her downfall. The evidence she thought I'd never find was now public record. And the reputation she once polished so carefully, of the perfect wife, the social butterfly, the woman who could have it all, was in tatters. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Nausea tried to shield her face, but the cameras caught every tear, every faltering step. Once, she had relished attention. Now it was her worst nightmare. I walked past her quietly, my lawyer at my side. I didn't gloat. I didn't smirk. I didn't need to. The silence between us carried more weight than words ever could. She had underestimated me, believed I would roll over, believed I was blind. But the truth was simple. She had been blinded by her own arrogance. The fallout came quickly. The lover she had risked everything for vanished, refusing to answer her calls once the scandal hit the news. Friends who once adored her distanced themselves, not wanting to be associated with betrayal. Even her own family looked at her with disappointment, tired of the lies. At home the storm had passed, but the wreckage remained. Nausea packed her things quietly, her shoulders hunched, her eyes hollow. "This isn't fair," she muttered one evening, shoving clothes into a suitcase. "I gave you the best years of my life." I said nothing. She had chosen her path, and she had walked it without hesitation. All I did was ensure she faced the consequences. In truth, the backfire wasn't just about money or property. It was about power. For so long she had held it over me, manipulating, deceiving, controlling. But now, stripped of wealth, influence, and allies, she was powerless. And I had never felt more free. As she carried her last box to the car, she turned to me, her voice shaking. "You'll regret this. One day, you'll regret everything." I met her eyes for the final time. "The only thing I regret," I said calmly, "is ever believing your lies." She drove away into the night, swallowed by her own bitterness. I stood in the doorway, the weight of months of betrayal finally lifting off my shoulders. Her plan had backfired spectacularly, and I was the one left standing. The house felt different after Nausea left. The silence, once suffocating, now carried a strange comfort. No more slammed doors. No more whispered phone calls in the middle of the night. No more sneers disguised as smiles. For the first time in years, the air was clean. But peace didn't arrive all at once. In the days following the verdict, I found myself replaying everything. Every argument, every suspicious late-night outing, every cruel word she had thrown at me. I realized how long I had been living under the shadow of her manipulation, convincing myself that things weren't as bad as they seemed. The courtroom clash hadn't just freed me legally. It had shattered the illusion I had clung to for so long. The community buzzed with the story. Some neighbors looked at me with sympathy, others with quiet admiration. "You handled it with grace," one of them said, patting me on the back. Grace wasn't what I felt. It was exhaustion mixed with relief, but I nodded anyway. Nausea's life, on the other hand, spiraled quickly. Word spread about her affairs, her greed, and the spectacular failure of her courtroom stunt. The lover who had whispered promises in her ear had disappeared without a trace. Her lawyer, embarrassed and angry, dropped her as a client. Even her closest friends distanced themselves, tired of being dragged into the wreckage. The woman who once strutted through life with unshakable confidence now struggled to find anyone willing to stand beside her. One evening, weeks later, I received an email from her. Just a few sentences, no theatrics, no accusations. "I thought I was smarter than you. I thought I could win. I lost everything. "I hope you're happy." I didn't reply. Not out of cruelty, but because there was nothing left to say. Some battles don't end with apologies or reconciliations. They end with silence. And silence in this case was closure. As the dust settled, I began rebuilding. Not just my finances or routine, but myself. I reconnected with old friends, people Nausea had pushed away because they didn't fit her image. I started going on morning runs again, something I hadn't done in years. I even picked up a long-forgotten hobby: woodworking. It felt good to create something with my hands, to watch order emerge from chaos, to control the outcome of something in a world where so much had felt uncontrollable. There were nights, though, when the loneliness hit. Sharing a bed with no one. Eating dinner across from an empty chair. Sometimes, I even caught myself expecting her to walk through the door. But those moments passed quickly, replaced by the reminder of why she was gone. Freedom, I realized, always comes at a cost. And while I had lost years of trust and companionship, I had gained something more valuable: peace. The biggest revelation, though, was how much strength I had discovered in myself. For so long I had let her believe I was weak, that I was blind, that I was too much of a fool to fight back. Playing that role had been painful, but in the end it became my weapon. Her arrogance had been her undoing. My patience, my silence, my planning, that had been my salvation. One afternoon, while sorting through old papers, I came across the prenup again. The very document she had scoffed at had ended up saving me. I held it in my hands, not with bitterness, but with quiet gratitude. Sometimes the smallest decisions we make in the beginning of a journey end up defining how it ends. Life moved forward. Slowly, steadily, with no dramatic twists, no sudden storms. Just quiet days, honest conversations with friends, and the comforting knowledge that I had survived. Nausea became a ghost of my past, a cautionary tale rather than a lingering wound. She had tried to ruin me, but in the end, she had only destroyed herself. Her trap had backfired, and I had walked away stronger than before. Standing on my porch one evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I realized something. Revenge hadn't been my victory. Survival had. Peace had. The chance to build a new life, free from lies, was the real prize. And for the first time in years I smiled. Not out of pretense, not to hide pain, but because I was truly free.